You already mentioned P.T. Barnum. He participated, purchased slaves. You talk about that in his book. Uh, Significant influence on minstrel shows in the 19th century. He even participated. You talked about it. Participated. Blackface himself. What exactly would motivate? What would interest white people? Large, I mean, massive numbers of white people. What would interest them in seeing a white person pretend to be a black person, singing songs for people that they have concluded are ignorant and inferior? Why were so many white people enthralled in this sort of entertainment, racist entertainment?
Well, that's the big question, because as you said, the minstrel shows were the biggest thing going through virtually all, from the 1830s on through pretty much the rest of the 19th century, and certainly in the years leading up to the Civil War. And what a lot of scholars talk about is the element of class, and that the first big audience for these minstrel productions were working class white folks, particularly young adults, what we would today call teenagers. They didn't have that category back then, but young men on the make in cities. And why would they be interested in watching this stuff? Well, in some way, one of the answers about this is that the audience was made up of people who were on the kind of lower rungs of white society, and they liked having somebody below them to make fun of. You feel good about yourself if you have somebody you can look down on, and you say, well, at least I'm not going to sink that far. And I think that is one of the roles that black folks played in the white psychic imagination in the 19th century. But I would say, pull in against that, it's complicated because minstrelsy is it's the first in a series of entertainment forms that originate out of black culture, that are co-opted by whites and then become tremendously successful and generate a lot of money and a lot of popular attention once they become either performed by white folks or are safely contained within white entertainment structures. And in the early 20th century we had ragtime. Some of this happened with jazz, although I think jazz managed to retain its kind of integrity as a black art form separate from the white entertainment industry. It certainly happened with rock and roll once Elvis Presley got a hold of old blues riffs and started ripping off R&B songs. Becomes a craze for young white kids. And one of the things that I think is behind this story that you can go back to with minstrelsy is a kind of envy. And Eric Lott wrote a book. It's a very interesting book. I don't agree with every aspect of it, but a book called Love and Theft. The theft part is easy to see, ripping off black dance moves, black songs, etc., black cultural styles. That's the theft part. What's the love part? I would call it almost more something like envy, or I think part of what role African Americans played in the white psychic imagination in popular culture from the 19th century onward is of that group that is paradoxically free of social rules. That if you're outside of society, if you're beneath civilization, maybe you don't have to play by its rules. And so the kind of sexual dance styles and moves that the minstrel performers ripped off or turned into this kind of popular form for white folks, it wouldn't be enough to explain it just to say that the white audiences were kind of sneering down and looking down at black culture. In some ways, they envied it, and I think that's the brilliant part of Eric Lott's analysis of it.
Hmm. He's a professor at my alma mater, University
That's
of
right.
Virginia.
That's right.
Wow. I see a lot of evidence. I don't know if love is the correct term. That would be the only thing. I don't know if what you're suggesting, envy, perhaps. I don't know, but it reminded me of Neely Fuller Jr. in his book where he says the reason that white people practice racism, white supremacy, is not because they hate black people, but that white people hate black people because white people are not black. That's his.
Yeah, that's I think that's a great way of saying it. And that is a kind of envy. It's sort of like, man, I wish I could. And you think about it in the context of slavery times to say, I wish I could be that free. Well, that's the paradox. Uh, Obviously, it's a group that's not free, even if you're talking about nominally free African Americans living in the North. I mean, not free to go where they please, not free to enter schools and universities and other public places. But somehow there was something about the cultural style that represented freedom or liberation because it was cast as uncivilized. I think that's the paradox that can go some way, maybe not the whole way, toward explaining the fascination.
Hmm. Wow. Context of white supremacy. Again, our guest, Dr. Reese, author of The Showman and the Slave and other volumes.